Hello, welcome to the July 5th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if we could, and if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same questions over and over again, and we will go through all the questions chronologically as they are asked, so we don't need to repeat the questions. It just kind of slows down the process for everyone. And when asking questions, also if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Artist, Elements, or Pro, whether you are running it on Mac or PC, whether it's version 11, 12, 13, all that information is helpful. We should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. So, and with that, and if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, I think we may have just cracked 34,000 topics. You could go to CubaseIndex.com. And with that, we could we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating the wonderful website so that you could search and immediately navigate to live streams just like that. We also want to give Agent K and Jazz Dude a special thanks for serving as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees, but they just do this to make it a better community experience and keep any riffraff out, which has been minimal recently. So wonderful job, and we appreciate everything they do. And we also will give Jazz Dude special kudos for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource. It's not an official source of resource from Steinberg, but it's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. And so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I'm presenting today from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live stream, please, or if you're watching it afterwards on a replay, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see. We also, just a quick programming note, I won't be able to do the live stream next Friday on July 12th. So next Friday there won't be a live stream, just a heads up. So we'll have it on Tuesday. We'll have the following weeks, the live stream. And then the week after that, the week of July 22nd, I'll be on holiday, so there won't be live streams that week. So no live stream next Friday. We will have it Tuesday, the week after that, but the week after that, the week of July 22nd, I will be on holiday. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we are just recovering from 4th of July holiday. I'm probably one of like at least 6 people in America that are working today. So we'll see how it goes. We may have a lower attendance because a lot of people are just have the day off in the US, but I realize it's not a holiday in most other countries. So let's go ahead and get started with the questions. All right, so we see from Dwight Cunningham, hello Greg, DC checking in from the Bahamas. The vertical options in the chord pads is missing on my DAW, i.e. to lock the pads. Also, how can I open up the chord pads with no info chords? Okay, so once we are here, and this has changed from version 12 to 13. So it used to be if we wanted to, set up our chords, all we would have to do, so if you just now, as we look at it, the Chord Editor is just going to be part of the actual chords right over here on the right hand side. So if we don't want to view that, we can come over here and just hide. So before we would double click and then you would open up a separate window, which we could still kind of do here if we want to see by list or proximity with different things. But once we have this icon turned on here, we can now just specify the chords directly here on the right hand side, and we could see this as our chord editor, or we can see it as a list, a circle of fifths for major or minor chords. So this way we could just have our chord definition always kind of tucked on the right hand side, so we don't have to open up a separate window. Now if you wanted to lock chords or do transpositions, there used to be a little settings cogwheel in the lower left hand corner of each chord pad. So instead of having to set that, and if we wanted to change settings, what we could do now is just trigger the chord pad, and we see this line here, and let's just make sure, I think if we come over to, so we see this secondary line here. This is where we could lock chords, where we could enable adaptive voicings if we wanted to transpose, or if we wanted to now come over here, change our tensions. Or if we wanted to do different inversions, we could change our voicings. So all those functions that you would often kind of do on the pad itself, we can now just trigger the pad and now trigger a different pad, and all those settings don't have to be opened up, and our chord pad definitions don't have to be opened up in separate windows. They can all just be done right here to kind of minimize and give it a better user experience. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Dwight. All right, so we have a question from Songs of the IVIE Brothers. Will Xtreme work with Cubase Artist 11 and Hallian Sonic and or SE? So I think you may need a Hallian Sonic, and that's a free download. That Hallian Sonic will work in Cubase Artist 11, and Xtreme, if you're not familiar with it, we'll just show it here quickly, is a new kind of synthesizer that Steinberg released. So there's a 7.1 Hallian update that was released on Wednesday, or on July 3rd. So, and with that, there's now a promotion going on. So I know we had people that were like, oh, when is Hallian going on sale? When is Hallian going on sale? So it's on sale for 50% off currently. So, and just yesterday, Steinberg released a new instrument. So we'll come over. And it's called Xtreme. So if we wanted to take a quick listen to it, and this will really kind of use, like, brand new spectral synth. It's monophonic synth, but it comes with some like really amazing sound design tools. So if we wanted to just kind of play, so just some like incredibly complex and sounds that are constantly evolving. So just holding kind of one note. So if you want to try different presets, we could just kind of come over here, but very kind of atmospheric, amazing sound design tool. So as we, it's sounds that evolve over long periods of time, so you can kind of hold one note and it's almost an entire film soundtrack. So it's still just holding one note on this preset. So that's just like a third of one note, and you can hear how the sounds will evolve. And again, that's a free instrument that Steinberg dropped yesterday, and a free update. So if you had Halligan 7, it's now 7.1, and adds this new spectral oscillator, and which has amazing time stretch capabilities. So, but that should, as long as you have Halligan Sonic or Halligan 7.1, and Halligan Sonic is a free player, and then you could get this instrument free of charge. So it should work in your Cubase 11 without any problems. All right, so we see Peter on. All right, you see Daniel says, yo, Greg, happy 4th of July. Hope you had some turkey. So yeah, turkey's more Thanksgiving and Christmas in the United States, but it is kind of usually 4th of July in the United States is more kind of cookouts on the grill with hamburgers, hot dogs, stuff like that, and fireworks. So some of our neighbors, we usually kind of have like a little block party. It's an amazingly non-coordinated, coordinated aspect in our neighborhood, and everyone kind of gets together at the end of the street, and everyone kind of pools all their fireworks that they collected. And some of the dads go a little crazy and go to different states to get powerful fireworks that are probably illegal locally, but we had a good time. All right, so we see Jazz Dude on, and we see Martin checking in from Germany. All right, wonderful to see Val from Vienna, Austria. Glad you could make it. All right, and we see Club to Breathe checking in from Rio, Brazil. Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, this Ninja Scared asks, hey Greg, is there an easy way to import tracks from another project into the current project I'm working on? Like if I want to import drums with a drum group to a brand new project using Cubase Pro 13. So let's say I have this project open. I'll switch it to a project that might be easier to see. All right, so let's say I have this project open and I wanted to import drums from a different project. So I have this project, and we can see that we have, a couple of different tracks. We have chord track, and what we want to do is to import the drums from a different project. So if we go to your file menu, we could now choose import tracks from project. So I'm going to go to our projects. I will come over, let's select this project. And if I have like all of let's say I want to import all of these drum tracks are in a folder in this project. I'm going to import the folder which contains all of the tracks. We could choose to exclude the events. We could also, on import, add events and parts. We could do it on the relative position, the cursor position, or absolute position. So now when I hit OK, all of my drum tracks have been imported automatically just like that. So go to your file menu to import tracks from project, choose the project, and then you could just simply import tracks from another project into the current one. So let me know if that makes sense for you. That's to this Ninja Scared. All right, so we have Asterix Korg Studio just saying hello. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we have Mahesh asking, can we change the time signature like 4/4 into 3/4 in Cubase? So what you could do is just come over here. We're going to add a track, and we could add what's called a signature track. So this is your time signature. So at this point, when we add, we can say, okay, this is going to be in 4/4, but let's say at measure 17, I wanted to switch to 3/4. So I'm just going to type in 3/4, and at measure 33, I want it to be in 7/8 for a couple of bars, and then we'll go back to 4/4. So at this point, we can right click, go to add track, add a signature track, and then you can just type in different meters. So if you want your project in 4/4, 3/4, 7/8, 6/8, 12/8, whatever meter you want, you could just simply click with the pencil tool, drop it in. It kind of has the value field selected, so you could just type in 3, 4 and hit enter, and then that's how you could switch between different meters. Or if you just want to set the initial meter to 3, 4 as opposed to 4, 4, you could just come over here and just change your meter. You could also change it from up here in the info line. So if I say, okay, let's start off at 3, 4, and now we could just kind of enter it in just that easily. And if you don't have a signature track, if you have like Cubase Elements, it may not. So I think if we go to Control or Command plus the letter T, like for tempo, that here we can see the tempo, and at the top we could enter in different signatures right from there if you need to change the time signature. All right, so we see from this Ninja Scared, can I sample from my audio interface directly into Groove Agent 5? So if you have the full version of Groove Agent 5, yes, you can sidechain directly in. If we have Groove Agent 5 SE version, so let's say if we were here and we have the instrument track and we go to our SE version, that at this point, I'll just quickly load a kit. Okay, so if we have a full, if we have just the SE version, what we would have to do is to now just take audio and drop it onto a pad. So we could do that. But if we have, let's say our, we'll come here and let's load up the full version of Groove Agent SE. So as soon as we go to our full version, I'm going to add an instrument track. We'll say the full Groove Agent. So not the full version of SE, but the full Groove Agent version. So once we have this, we can now sidechain directly into our Groove Agent. So I'm going to, let's say I have this Groove Agent here. So I want to sidechain in. We're going to set our sidechain source from Groove Agent, the other Groove Agent version. And now we will come over to, and let's say we just want, so we'll see recorder here. Right. So I can see that we're getting signal in. So all we have to do now is just hit record. And now, as soon as we'll stop record. So let's go ahead and trim our start. So say we'll have our start position here and our end position. So now what we've done is we can now just trigger, and we've sampled in directly into this particular pad. So the full Groove Agent, we could just sample directly from your audio interface right in. So you could just sidechain that audio track to Groove Agent, or you could just do it from different instruments and be able to trigger the particular samples. So Groove Agent can do it, Groove Agent SE cannot. You'd have to kind of drag the files over. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on. See this Ninja Scared just says, thanks, Greg, for all you do. You're appreciated. Thank you so much. All right, we have Pastoral Apologetics from Southeast Texas joining us. We hope you're not affected by Hurricane Beryl. It's coming. It's en route to Texas. Hopefully, you'll miss you. All right, always great to see Matt Elston on. All right, and we have Asterix Korg Studio just saying hi from Germany. All right, so Daniel is just saying, hi, Greg. It is a holiday in the rest of the world every Tuesday and Friday besides the next 2 Fridays. All right. All right, so you see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin joining us. We have Soren checking in from Sweden. Pertti Komenen from Finland as well. All right, Tim Weinheimer asks, is there a way to trigger the arranger tracks parts as patterns tracks from a key or pad on your MIDI controller? So yeah, we could do it with the MIDI remote or generic remote. So let's just come over. All right, so let's say I have a project with the arranger track. Okay, so, and if you're not familiar with the arranger track, we could basically set up particular songs. Like we could have a song and have multiple arrangements. So we could define our different parts. So on the arranger track, we could say this is the guitar solo, and I like this little vamp in the guitar solo. So we could have parts within parts. We could label these just by holding down the Alt or Option key and typing in a name, a descriptive name. So let's say we want solo for that. Now, if we want to trigger these different arranger segments, so when we can utilize the arranger track, if you're not familiar with it, what we could do is instead of playing our project linearly, we could have multiple arranger tracks. So I could have multiple variations. So we could audition different arrangement ideas. So instead of playing linearly, so we can see that instead of playing just straight across, that we could play in kind of a non-linear and be very creative with our arrangements. So let's go to like our MIDI remote, and I wanted to assign buttons on my MIDI remote here. Let's say to switch between different arrangers. So I'm gonna just come here, let's do. All right, so what we're going to do is I'll just say, okay, let's take this, and I'm going to go, I double click on my controller, and now we could go to the mapping assistant. We want to expose the functions browser, so I'm going to go to my key commands, and let's go to arranger, and I can say trigger arranger event 1. So I'm going to come here. All right, and now I want, so we have this button is doing arranger track 1. I'm going to select a different button here. So I hit the button, and we're going to assign this to arranger event 2. So I double click, hit that button. Let's assign this to arranger event 3. I think I may have some of these already set up from a previous one. So now I could assign these different tracks to, so I could start off here. I want to go to the introduction. I can now just kind of come here and hit the MIDI remote. Now, as we do this, we could have different jump modes. So as we do this, we could say, okay, we want the jump mode to be every bar or one beat or at the end of the pattern. So now while we're playing this, I could say, okay, let's. So now when I hit the next button within a beat, we could just go. So let's go back to our intro. Or we could do it at a bar. So as we just hit the buttons here, we could just navigate to our different arranger tracks. Now we could also set this up if you wanted to do it with, not using the MIDI remote. If we come over to our studio setup, we could add a generic remote device, and in here we could just say we want this particular note, and we could just capture a MIDI note. So I'll just open that again. Sorry, just triggered it accidentally. So we can say this MIDI note, and we can say this MIDI note, and we basically aligned what the incoming MIDI message is to what the function is here. So I'll say, let's come here to command. Let's go to arranger. And at this point, we could just trigger our different arranger events that we see listed here. So we could trigger 20 different arranger events. So that way, when you hit a MIDI note, you could immediately on your computer keyboard, or if you have a separate MIDI controller just for the arranger track, you could just have that set up right there in the generic remote. So either through generic remote or using the MIDI remote, you could trigger. All right, so we have Stephen, Michael 1 just checking in, saying hello. All right, so we see Dwight Cunningham just saying, yes, Greg, thanks very much. All right, we see that Jazz Dude has posted about the Hallian sale going on. Always wonderful to see Mark Rabin from Montana on. And everyone give a big woof, a virtual woof to Stella, Mark's dog. All right, so we see from Dwight Cunningham, says, Greg, also, can you open up chord pads as a blank pad to place my own custom chords if possible? All right, so when we go to the chord pads, one of the things that you could do now is you could select all, and then I think that there is a reset. So let's say, okay, so we see from this button here, I could select all of my chord pads. So if I wanted to reset all of them, and then you see this little trash, and that would remove the chord pad assignments. So we'll hit OK, and now we have kind of a blank slate to work with. So again, let's say if we have our chord pads here, we can select all the chord pads, and then we could remove the assignments on all the chord pads. We'll hit OK just as a confirmation, and now we could assign your chords as you see fit. So you can do it one at a time or select all of them, like so. All right, so we see from Pastoral Apologetics, do you know if there are any plans to have a meter or tempo track in Cubase? So I haven't heard of any discussions, but I'm usually not in those discussions because I don't work at the main office where the development's done. I work for the U.S. distributor, but I could pass it along to the team to see if we get any response, but usually they don't share stuff until it's released. All right, so Mark Raven says he's grateful for the free instrument. Cells are going to love it. 4th of July is blow stuff up holiday and drive drunk with guns. It's pretty accurate. All All right, so Daniel is saying, seriously, I love that happens for real. Illegal fireworks. I thought these things were only in The Simpsons. I love it. Yeah, so my next door neighbor apparently went at 5 in the morning and drove 3 states over to get fireworks that you could get in. So different states may be more lenient with what fireworks they sell. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a highly regulated industry. It's a lot of guys that are will set up a little stand on the side of the road. It will all be gone next year until about June 1st of next year. So it might be a little more accurate to how the Simpsons portray it than we all realize. All right, so we have Mike Goodman saying hi, so thanks for joining us. All right, always wonderful to see Tim K checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands. We have Uno Memento from Finland. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we have Scape21 checking in from San Diego. Such a beautiful city. Haven't been there in a while. All right, so you see John Costigan says, Greg, thank you for your invaluable aid in working on July 5th. I appreciate all you do. So thank you for the kind words. I figure maybe that there could be people that might be working normally that have the day off that might be able to catch a live stream. And since I have to take next Friday off and have vacation, we'll try to get as many in during July as we can. All right, so we have Ali Rashtra Music, just saying hi from India to the Cubase gang. Welcome to the live stream. We're so happy you made it. All right, so we have Sable Winters from the Bay Area. Glad you can make it. Hope you had a wonderful 4th. All right, so Steve Green just says, hi, Greg, why doesn't my tempo-detected imported audio file not line up with the bars at the top of the project without hours of time warping? You could do it in minutes. I can't seem to do it. So I don't have the file on this computer, Steve, that you sent. But, one of the tricky things is, like, at the beginning of your file, something to be aware of. You had, like, the guitar and bass. And vocals, so the guitar and bass themselves were out of time amongst themselves. So you kind of have to figure out where the downbeat is. But if you want, I could see if I could transfer the file from my other computer to this computer, and I could show it on Tuesday's live stream if you want. I could walk through it on Tuesday's live stream, how to do the tempo detection, how I did it. So I'm happy to do that, but I want to make sure that it's not going to be any copyright infringements, and I won't get flagged by YouTube for doing that. So if you could send an email, let me know it's okay to do that, and I'd be happy to transfer the file over and show it to you on Tuesday's live stream. All right, sorry, Chatfield jumped. All right, so we see from Dwight Cunningham about the chord pads, resetting that, says, Greg, awesome, thanks. Yeah, so I know sometimes when you change things, sometimes things will be changed to make it more accessible, and when stuff was kind of hidden before and you're used to where it was hidden, and then it's more accessible, that change can throw you off. So Mark Raven's just mentioning that in Montana, there's no fireworks, firecrackers, or bottle rockets, but all night still cowards because of the explosions. Poor ears. She got lots of treats. Yeah. Our cat fared very well, so I thought he might be kind of wigged out. but he seemed to do okay. But it's kind of famous for a lot of pets not liking fireworks. All right, so we see, I think it's George. Hi, Greg. In what situations should I go for bounce in place, flatten real-time processing? What are the pros and cons? So if we were to do, let's say if we were over here and we were doing different warping. So I'm going to take this file here and I'll double click, make sure we have our hit points. Okay, so let's say I'm going to create just some warp markers here. And let me just adjust that sensitivity down, the threshold. Okay, so let's say I've now created warp markers. So, a lot of times if we are doing like warping of different elements, so let's say I am now doing free warping. So as we want to put in, let me just utilize a different project here quickly. This one is kind of old. This project's a little better set up for. So sometimes when we flatten parts, we do away with, it's like rendering the files, but a lot of times if we need to actually have the ability to tweak it easily. So let's say you're doing warping on a particular project here. So let's say I will come over and let's say we've done our free warping. And I'll make this just obviously big as we. So let's say, as we've done our warping here, and someone was like, oh, I really did intend for that to be slightly ahead of the beat, but you've made the change. So if we choose to, whether we're doing like very audio editing or we're doing warping, so these changes are kind of happening as the file is playing back. So if we had flattened it or basically bounced it in place, that could save some real-time processing, but usually it's not like a super heavy lift on a CPU for doing very audio or doing warping changes. So these are kind of just played back in real time. So, but if we have flattened those changes, and again, we could just, as we work with our, so as we're working with our audio and we go to our process, we could just kind of come over here and choose to kind of flatten the particular changes. So say, once we're here, that we choose to flatten it, that's basically creating a new file. But if you need to tweak it just a tiny bit afterward, it's almost like starting from scratch. So unless you specifically, I know that sometimes like rendering instruments, like an instrument could take a tremendous amount, depending on the instrument. Some instruments may take a tremendous amount of CPU. So if you have an older computer, you may want to, at that point, render it so it's just playing back an audio file. So, but if a lot of times when you're doing warp, like free warping, you may just want to go back and just make subtle changes as you listen to it. As other people listen to your work, they may not like, your warp that you did, your decisions, and if you don't flatten it, it's just a matter of saying, oh, okay, they wanted that ahead of the beat intentionally. So they didn't want that to be a bit overhanded in the process. So instead of having to find the hit points and redo everything, at this point you could just make the warp changes. So what I often do, personally, if I was doing like a really heavy free warp thing, what I would do, so let's say I was starting on this track for free warping. What I often do is just come here and I say duplicate version. So I make a new track version, which is kind of like an alternate version, and then I will probably do like a bounce selection. Okay, so at this point, I can now come over and I'll say, let's convert my warp markers or my hit points to warp markers. So now when I come over here, I can do all of my warp edits freely. So let's say, okay, I do my warping here. And I've made these changes, and the person's like, oh, you totally destroyed everything I just did. Then you could go back to the original, and then you could have one separate version that's just going to be for the warp edits. So I like to work like that, and that way you could always kind of go back very easily. But unless you're really low on real-time CPU, like audio performance usage, and you see that your computer CPU and your audio performance is creeping up, I wouldn't necessarily feel the need to flatten the processing. Just kind of keep it as it is, and then you could render the files, you could do your export, and it'll all be saved, and you could just very easily go back and tweak as needed. All right. So John Costigan says, in many ways, The Simpsons is America. Yeah, I used to try to explain, like, marketing to Steinberg. I was like in the 90s, I would just say, think of, you're making this ad for Homer Simpson. And it took them a while to get, but they've gotten much better at it. All right, so we see Mr. Ox asks, are there any plans to allow the MIDI Remote to support composite MIDI devices like the Tascam US 2400, which is basically 4 MIDI devices in one? So you could definitely use, like the 2400 is, I believe it's like 3 devices. So it's like 24 channels it's like almost 3 Mackie controllers put together. So when you do that, that device is transmitting as 3 separate devices. And it's kind of the Mackie control protocol that will allow you to utilize it that way. But, so as we're working, the how the unit communicates to the MIDI remote would be through a single MIDI port. So as we go to set it up, and that's just how so as we're doing communication, it's not going to see it as a 24 channel device. It will see it as 3 8-channel devices. So, so it won't necessarily, so we're not going to have one MIDI control layout that will, one MIDI device panel, one MIDI remote panel that will be able to utilize all 24 channels, because it is basically, that's not what the unit is actually doing. The unit is actually, transmitting on different MIDI ports. It's transmitting as 3 separate devices. So, and the MIDI remote is going to be utilizing, one MIDI port, so that as you connect it, everything would be, have a clear definition of what each MIDI port is doing. So it's going to be based on the MIDI port as opposed to what the physical layout of the device is. All right, so we have George, and could you please show briefly how I can enlarge an existing MIDI event to have more space to edit to the left or to the right? Okay. So let's take a look at a MIDI event, and we want to add more space to it. All right, so if we wanted to add more space to the right, all we'd have to do is just kind of extend the bottom handle. So I'll make this larger. So as we hover over, you'll see this little, we see the controls will appear, and the bottom handles will allow us to extend out to the right. And if we wanted to extend to the left, just grab the bottom handles like so, and now what was one particular event here, we could just enlarge just like that. Now if we had like this event repeated several times, and we wanted to join these together, we could use the glue tool to join. And if we have like 100 of them, hold down the Alt or Option key and click in the first one, and that will glue all the connected events to make one part. And now that we do that, just grab the bottom right handle, the bottom left handle, and we could add and enlarge the event before or after the existing data. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, Sable Winters is just asking, what is Xtreme? So Xtreme is a new free instrument that Steinberg released yesterday that works in Hallian Sonic or Hallian 7. So it's definitely worth getting. The price is right. All right, so we see from Daniel, it says, so the other day I was on a walk listening to his favorite Kizomba songs. I'm sure he said that wrong. And I just realized I knew how to make the beat I was listening to. It seemed trivial, that thing I never used to know. So yeah, after a while, after you start creating music in a DAW, you get kind of very critical, and you're like, oh, I know, and I kind of miss the days of like when someone doing a bad snare drum or bad hi-hat programming didn't ruin a song for me. But after a while, when you figure out and you can envision how everyone is doing their production techniques, it's always an interesting perspective. But sometimes it could leave you a little jaded, so try not to get to that stage. If you're like, oh, if they just changed the velocity in the hi-hat, it would be so much better, And it's like no one cares about that but you. All right, wonderful to see Captain Energy Music on. Just saying hey to everyone. All right, so we see from George, is there a preference setting that I could change so that I don't need to shift click with the combined object range tool to set the play cursor? So, if we have, let's say we have our combine tool here. So, a lot of times when we're doing this, like one click will, select the event. I think that's logical. Some programs may work differently, but one click will we'll select the event, like double clicking will open the editor for that particular event. I think that's all sensible. So if we wanted to kind of play, like if we wanted to navigate quickly, but not necessarily, like while we have the select the range tool, if we hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, then we can, just come over and navigate, and some of these may also be adjustable through preferences. So if we go to preferences or settings, if you're on later Mac OS versions, and we go to tool modifiers, so let's say we go to our select tool, that you could change, like, so we can see that the set cursor position is Option plus Shift. You could modify the particular, you could change the modifiers here for to change. So if you didn't want to hold down, or if you wanted to switch which modifier it was. So again, go to your preferences, to editing, tool modifiers, select the select tool here, and then you could adjust the modifiers for different functions for the select tool. So you can alter it there. All right, so we see Millard Brown has joined us from Esteme, Pennsylvania. It's pretty hot here too. Says, sorry to be late. Work beckon, sold guitar, needed shiny new strings. All right, Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so you see as follow-up, I think, with the selection tool, it says, whenever I try about enlarging the events, whenever I tried to extend the range in the MIDI file, the MIDI notes changed their timing position. Maybe I did something wrong. I'll check that. So, when you do this, make sure that you don't actually move the event like from the center. So you don't want that. You just want, and there's also two different modes for the selection tool. So once we go into the selection tool, you want it to be in normal sizing. There's a sizing moves contents. So as I adjust here, what this will do is take the beginning of this event and kind of shift all the events over to the right. So we can see that where this will turn to white, that these events are just kind of shifted over to the right. So you don't want that. You also don't want it to be in sizing applies time stretch, because now I could take this and fit all of this MIDI information, and we can see that we basically have elongated that event to fit that particular range. So make sure also that when we go to your sizing mode, that in the object selection tool, and you'll just see like this little drop down menu here, that you're in normal sizing. So give that a try. All right, so Ronnie Martinson Bond says, you said option tool. What would that be on PC? So I'm sorry if I didn't. I usually try to have both modifiers. So it would be the Alt key on PC. So when in doubt, the command and control key would be this functional equivalence, and the Alt and Option key would be the functional equivalence between Mac and PC. Sorry for my aiding to your confusion. See, Daniel said, that happened also, man. One of the songs I was critical of because the beat was uninspired, according to my expert opinion. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch from Barn Door Recording from Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you had a wonderful 4th of July. All right, so Sable Winter says, I'm going to upgrade to Halion Sonic 7. Dom's Demo Extreme sounds like the Twin Peaks theme. Yeah. It's kind of a hold one note instant soundtrack. You could be a genius. All right, so we see from Sabatino Studios, says, "Hi Greg, I'm ready to purchase 2 new USB audio interfaces. Steinberg doesn't seem to have any new 8-input device, so the Steinberg UR816C is still being made and available. And that works wonderfully well. So check out, check out the UR816C that is available." All right, so we have Robert Daisy Webb. So I have a template with all my instruments and audio tracks I frequently use. Is there a and his question is there a way to insert this template into an already existing project without losing the other tracks? Okay, so let's say all right, so I'll just make a new template here to start. So we'll do new project. All right, so I have 16 audio tracks. Let's add 2 group tracks. We'll make 4 group tracks. Okay, and we will come over. Let's add a groove agent. And I want a reverb and a delay. Okay, so let's save this as a template. I'm going to change a preference real quick on my. All right, so now we're saving this as a template. We're going to call it July 5th. Okay, so I'm going to start a new project. Close this. We'll start a new project with our template. So we'll say new project. We'll come over to more. We'll see our July 5th template that we just built. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this song. We have an empty template, and I'm going to just come over here. We don't have to do a save as. I'm going to save the project. And I'll save it to my desktop. I'll call it July 5th, delete me. Okay, so I'm in another project. And what we want to do is to take, in essence, all of those tracks from that template. So we'll come over here. I'm going to open up a particular project. Okay, so what I do now is, since I took that template and saved it as a project, I'm going to go to my file menu, and we're going to say import tracks from project. I'll go to my desktop. We'll see July 5th, delete me. And what we can do now is I'm going to choose to select all, and I hit OK. And now all of my tracks from my template, my effects, my groove agent, my groups, have all been incorporated and merged into this existing project. So take your template, save it as a project, then come to your file menu to import tracks from project, select that project that we just created, select all the tracks, and then hit OK. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay. So we see from Patrick W. It just says, I just installed Xstream. All sounds are disabled, rebooted, not in Activation Manager. Any hints? All right. So when you do this, don't just go to the Steinberg Download Assistant and install it. So what you do is let's come over here and let's just say, we'll go to steinberg.net. All right. So we'll come over here and we'll say, just come right here to the Steinberg website, say free spectral synthesizer, click on get Xstream free. And then it will take you to where you sign in with your My Steinberg account. You'll hit next. Then we could download it for your Mac or your PC. And then that will make the link between your account, and then when you go to, so once you've done that, it's then going to show up in your Steinberg Download Assistant. So we'll open that. And it may update the Steinberg Download Assistant for you if necessary. Then you should see it under My Products once we've done that process on the website and you're logged into your My Steinberg account. Then you could install it, and that should activate it, but you might also just make sure when you go to your Steinberg Activation Manager, if it's still not showing up, and then if you go, you may see it under the not activated license, then you could activate right from there until you see it show up in your activated. So if you just went to like the virtual instruments and said, okay, I see my VST instruments and plugins and downloaded it, that wouldn't make the actual link to your Steinberg account. So go through it from the website, link it to your account, then it will show up in your Steinberg Download Assistant, and should make more sense that way if you haven't done that approach. All right. All right, Miller Brown says, Greg, what do I need to do to get SQL audio files to actually be audible? I can see them in Media Bay, but they have a kind of a dash sign in a circle and nothing plays. How do I authorize? Thanks. So there are a number of, so when we come over, let's go to Media Bay, we'll come to loops and samples. So you do get a SQL library with it. And so we can see that there's going to be a lot of different MIDI loops that are available here. So let me just make sure we have. So I think most of the SQL content is going to be like for the sequel library is MIDI loops. Now, if you go to the Steinberg website, there were sequel content sets that were sold separately that were kind of add-on purchases to sequel. So if you downloaded some of those that were, that you needed a license to purchase, then you may get like the red circle with the dash or like the minus sign through it, indicating that perhaps it's not licensed. But I think just about all of the sequel content that I have here, these aren't audio files, but more of MIDI loops. So when I come to like, piano, I could just select piano, and now as we audition, it's going to load up. And it's going to load the instrument up so that we can then play the MIDI loop. But I think what comes with Cubase is going to be just the particular MIDI loops, and these play back through Hallian Sonic or Hallian Sonic SE, depending on which one you have installed. So make sure you didn't accidentally download like different content that was sold separately. All right. So we have Ronnie Martinson Bond, just says no probs, thanks. Okay. All right. So we have Tim Weinheimer, says thanks Greg for all your hard work indexing the Cubase Hangout after the stream. It's nice to go back and find what topic you need to learn in Cubase. So helpful, much appreciated. So you're welcome. I think it's worth seeing. I think my efforts in doing kind of the index, makes without it, I think the viability of doing 4 hours isn't as high. All right, so we have, just says, question, one suggestion for the manual, I often need to see more screenshots to identify what buttons are meant. Example in the key editor, the button to show the part borders left and right. So, be aware that there's kind of two different manuals. So there's one, it's kind of a web version, and one, so we'll come over here, let's go to Steinberg.help. And we'll just come over, and once we do this, we say, okay, we're looking for Cubase 13. All right, so we'll come over here to the manual. So, there's going to be this is just kind of changed recently. But I'm going to, all right, so we can see all this. So let's say we want Cubase 13 Pro. All right, so I'm going to go to the operation manual here. So, it used to be that there was kind of like, different let me just see. All right, I'll just try this again from here. Let me just. All right, so I'm just going to download it from here. Okay, so if you're, so let's go to like the MIDI key editor. So once you're in here, like this has a lot more, screenshots. So let's just come to, all right, so, once you're in here, so we can see like what the different icons mean. Let me just switch this to, I hate that it always opens in 2-page view. But as you come over here, so you can see, okay, this is what this particular icon means with step entry. So if we can just kind of go up so you could see kind of what these particular, so make sure that you're kind of actually in. So we'll just kind of come over here, let's look for. So but you can see that each of these icons are kind of explained visually here within. So, if you're using kind of the web help version, try using, I just always have the PDF manual downloaded so that we can, just search for it. So we can see kind of what every tool is doing. So transpose, transposition, quantize. So there's a lot more images in this particular one as well. So just be aware of that. All right, get my questions computer on. Bear with me just for a moment. All right, so we have Alan David Daly checking in from Ireland. Thanks for joining us. See, Robert Daisy Webb says amazing. That was very helpful. See, Sable Winters, it says Cubase Reddit post. Cubase is very popular in Japan due to the Yamaha Association. So yeah, I mean, Cubase has always been, I think, the most used DAW in Japan, even before we were part of the Yamaha family. But yeah, it's very popular worldwide. See, Miller Brown says he got his first Cubase with Cubase 4 LE packaged with the Zoom Handy recorder. He did 4 albums for his band, and he eventually moved up to Cubase 5 LE and didn't get Pro until the band broke up. All right, so we see Hamo 1974 has joined us. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we have Vince checking in from Canada, from Fly V. All right. All right, so Daniel is just saying, well, that's a massive manual, 1,449 pages. Isn't that actually that much if it covers everything? So there's a separate manual for remote control devices, for the scoring, for plugin reference as well. So there's other manuals as well. All right, so we see from Lucky Gold Stare. How can you make the sampler track window update to a newly selected sampler track window when the sampler track in the lower zone is not open? Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just do a new project. All right, and I'll do it not based on the template. Sorry about that. All right, so let's say I'm going to come here to the sampler control. Okay, so I'll make a couple of sampler tracks.
In the air, remember me, remember.
All right, so now, okay, so we have 4 sampler tracks. Now, if we are, because we can think of the sampler track as, almost having 2 separate functions. So one is the sampler track will function, as, if we're triggering MIDI devices. So if I double click here, that we will see the MIDI device. At this point, if we just, come over and, if we have the sampler control at the bottom open, because we're just selecting the track is playing this particular instrument. But if we have the sampler control active, that, as we navigate up and down to our different tracks, that would automatically show you the sampler track. But, the sampler track, we can think of it as it's going to have MIDI data that you may need to edit. Sampler track also has, our channel settings, in addition to, so, while we're here, if we wanted to, edit the sampler track, I think if we just click right here, so this little icon, that will just go directly to the sampler track as well without having to open it. So okay, so just make sure it says, how can you make the sampler track window update to new selected sampler track when the sampler track in the lower zone? Yeah, so just, you'll see like this little icon right here. Then you could, as you do that, that will select the track and reflect the sampler control in the bottom. So let me know if that works for you. It makes sense. So we see from George just saying, I didn't know about the section in the manual, although I've downloaded the PDF. Of course, never spotted that at the end. Thanks. And Val is just saying, oh boy, there are submanuals. All right, so we see Val just has a future request, maybe a feature request, or a future feature request, having folders able to be saved as track presets. We can save multiple files as a track preset already, but realize that a folder, again, can contain stuff that's not involved with the track preset. So a folder can contain a transposition track. It could contain a tempo track. It could have a time signature track. So, but if you want to come over and say, okay, we are here and I like the particular drum sound that we've dialed in here, all you have to do is we'll activate the project. And we'll right click and let's say save track preset. So I'll say my studio drums. Okay, so I'll go to a new project here. And we'll go to the media bay. I'm going to go to user presets, to track presets, to multi. And we'll say, oh, here's my studio drums. I drag it over. And all the settings that I had set up for that particular project are now just recalled. So again, it's just recalled into one single file that will recall all those settings. And if you do it within a folder, I don't think if you did it within a folder that it would make any difference. But again, a folder can contain elements that aren't recalled within the track preset. But you could save multiple tracks as a single preset and drag and drop it over into your project very easily. So I think it kind of gets you to the same spot in the end. Let me know if that makes sense, Val, for you. Okay, so we see from Lockheed Gold Stair says, if you have the sampler track in an external window. So let me just jump back to that project. Okay, so let's say we have this in an external window. We activate the project. Okay, so let me just make this smaller so we have it. So let's say if I have that in my external window, that again, I just click this button in the external window is automatically updated as well. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. All right, so we see from Ziggy Edison. Hi, Greg. Is it just me or is my Windows balloon tips are hidden behind my mouse cursor, making them unhelpful? Can you ask the team if it could be offset? So a lot of times what happens if it's offset, then it's actually selecting, the cursor is selecting something else. So, there could be just kind of a density of different options. So, but I think once you have it set, that you could kind of move the cursor around. So it may be that way initially, but then you could, for a lot of the functions, just kind of move the cursor once the pop-up window, I'll bring it to their attention, but it may not be the highest priority. All right, and we see, and if the lower zone is closed as well, so let's say I have the lower zone closed, I have this open, this with the sampler. So we will come over here, we go to that, let me close the lower zone. think it's going to work kind of the same way. So let's say we have our sampler control here, and again, just that may open in the lower zones, let's say. But yeah, just clicking here, that will update in the standalone window as well. All right, so FlyV says, weird thing is I have 3 PCs, but only one works with the download manager, the oldest one. So make sure that you don't have also, like sometimes, like I had a friend that was running into a similar issue, and it was just like a virus protection program that was stopping his Steinberg download manager from functioning and downloading. All right, Sable Winters asks, how many PCs can be used with a Cubase license? So you can run Cubase, you could have it licensed on 3 computers. So that way, if you have a home computer, a studio computer, and a laptop, you could be licensed on all 3. All right, so we have Nick from Essex in the UK saying, wishing that everyone is well, and is asking if anybody knows where Summer went. He can't seem to find it in his rainstorm. All right, so we have a question from Daniel. It says, there are different patterns of beats happening in the songs I'm listening to. I want to create them all in Beat Designer. You showed recently to save as preset. If I have 20 presets saved, do they remain saved across new projects, or to just be quickly loaded, or are they saved only in that project? So they'll be saved globally. So let's come over. Just mute these quickly. Okay, so now when I come over here, I'm going to just tell it to go directly to the drum map. We're going to make the drum map from the instrument. We'll open up Beat Designer. So I'll do a nonsensical beat. All right, so let's say now we have all right, so we're going to save this as a preset. All right, we'll save it as Daniel. All right, I'm going to go to a new song. And we'll load up our beat designer. And there's our preset. And so once you save the preset in Beat Designer, it's freely available to open up in any other project. So don't save it just within a project. Come over here and you'll see the preset management, save the preset, and then you can load it up into any other project. So it's not tied directly to the project once you save it as a Beat Designer preset. Then you can play it with other instruments very easily. So let's say if I wanted to go through different groove agent patterns here, I'll load up Kit. Sometimes you find really happy mistakes, something unintentional. So all sorts of fun that you can do. So again, save it as a preset in Groove Agent, and it's readily available forever for you. All right. All right. Okay, just reading through. All right. So we see from Club to Breathe, says drop audio file. Question: drop audio file at the chord track inside a folder. Cannot add more tracks. The chord track count is at the limit. Crashes. While outside the folder, it works normally. Cubase Pro 13.01. So I think that was resolved in. If you're running 13.01, there's 13.041, which I think did resolve. But let's go ahead and I'll try chord track here. But I think it is an issue that was resolved. Let me just put some chords in quickly here. All right, and let me just make sure that inside a folder, so okay, so I'm going to just import a quick audio file. I've had it happen to me as well, but I think it was resolved, but we'll take a quick look. All right. Okay, so so one of the things that I will often do, you could have new versions of chord tracks. So I'm going to drag that in. So we populated the chord track like that. I'm going to undo, and now I'm going to drag it over top There's our chord tracks in a folder. So yeah, so check to make sure. So again, if you're running 1301, I'm running 1304.1, which is the latest version. So, but I think that was resolved. All right, so you see from George says, in the Cubase forum, I see a thread with feature requests for Cubase 14. Many say fix 13 first, but honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the stability of Cubase 13. No crashes so far, although I am a rookie. So yeah, to me, those threads are always interesting when people are submitting passionate feature requests for features that are already in the program. There's always, and there's a myriad of different potential hardware combinations that's impossible to test for. So but I think that Cubase 13 has been pretty stable. I know that there were some issues with particular video cards early on the Windows platform. I think most of that is kind of resolved, and we work closely with a lot of the video card companies to resolve stuff. But I think most people tend to, get their work done in Cubase, and if you're working in Cubase, you may not participate in forums as much. So. We see Sable says it's been over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in California and San Francisco. So yeah, weather is a little weird everywhere. The weird may become the new normal. So. All right, so you see from Daniel, also can I have presets of like 4 to 6 instruments I could switch between to try a particular beat, like kick, hi-hat, toms, etc., and then another collection to quickly switch between and play the same beat with different collection of instruments. So if we have like the beat programmed, just like what we were doing just a minute ago of taking that groove agent pattern here, once, so, as we're doing this, if you want to switch between different instruments, and if we just choose to, so let's say I'm going to come here and let's just drag it to, we can insert the pattern at the cursor on the selected track. And if I wanted to just make, a MIDI track, we could copy this down. And, if I have, and all we would have to do is come over here and set the MIDI output port of what device we wanted it routed to. So if I have an instrument track, let's say I do a Hallian Sonic with a drum sound. So let's say I have this kit here. I want to, and so at this point I could take like this MIDI file here, and I will, so I'm going to route this pattern. And I'm going to say, okay, we want this to go out to Hallian Sonic. So now it's playing this Hallian Sonic sound. I could switch the MIDI channel output. So once you have kind of the MIDI data on the particular event, you could just kind of switch back and forth between different sources. So it's very easy once you have kind of the MIDI data to route it to different instruments to try out and audition different ideas. Daniel's happy to have a preset named after him. And he just says, happy mistakes are truly, and he just says, I'm truly am the Bob Ross of music. So I don't have his cool hair. So Fly V's just saying, he says, I love Cubase Pro 13 so much that my old Cubase, then his old Cubase LEAI elements. Sival says FL24 dropped and everybody's hyped about a chord progression tool, and he's just laughing about it. See, Greg, it's amazing from Daniel. Just says, Greg, it's amazing. You predicted my next question immediately. Must be in the zone. All right, Sable Winters asks, how do I start a song in Groove Agent and build with Howley Sonic the easy way? Okay, so let's just do a new song, new project here. Okay, and one of the great things that I love about starting with Groove Agent is you don't necessarily have to get very granular with it. So I'm going to add an instrument track, so let's just get Groove Agent going. So I'm going to load a kit, and I'll start off maybe with like the Studio SE kit. So let's say we'll do all right, so let's say I want to set my tempo, maybe 108. All right, so let's say, okay, we're kind of liking this groove a bit. Let me just get back to my right zone, get that in. All right. So let's say, what do we want to do next? So I have kind of a basis for that's maybe more inspiring than a click track. So probably hearing the drums is better than just hearing the click by itself. So I may start off with, let's add an instrument track, and let's just do like an electric piano or piano sound. So I'll just start with Howley Sonic. All right. So let's say, okay, let's do warm, grand. All right, so we have kind of a piano. All right, and now I want to maybe just do chords. So we'll come over here. Let's add a chord track. All right, and let's just do a quick progression here. All right, so I just kind of mapped out a quick chord progression. All right, so I have this chord progression, and now we're going to start off, and I'm just going to tell the chord track, we're going to monitor. I'll just change this chord. Let's make this maybe an A7th. All right, so now that I have this, let's say I don't play piano well. It's been well documented on live streams. I'm just gonna come over here to activate the flex phraser. Let's turn it on. And now I want to find maybe a piano and keyboard. So let's do like a pop progression. And let's say that's maybe too busy. I want to set the tempo scale here to 1/8 notes. I'm going to add a MIDI track, and we'll put it on channel 2. And I won't monitor that one, so we'll come here. All right, so I'm going to All right, so now I want to drop a bass part in. So let's go to like our electric bass. And this one's sold separately. I'll just do an electric bass, a stock one here. So let's say we want to find bass, electric bass. And now we could just kind of come over and say a fretless bass sound. So all right, so all right, so let's say I'll just switch my groove agent to follow transport. So now when I stop, groove agent will. And at this point, we could just say, okay, on this MIDI part here, so I wanted to put this on to, should be. So we're going to set this to output, not to groove agent, but to Howling Sonic. So now if I wanted to just come over and say, let's have this track follow the chord track. So now when we play this. So, and at this point, I could just kind of drag these chords. And if I wanted to even just kind of take, so now we have kind of the chords that are being mapped out here. And then we could go to my chord track and we could say, just follow the root notes. And we could synchronize. Or we could even just take like quickly with the MIDI editing, and I'll just say let's keep the root notes, and let's just delete the rest of the notes so we can have our bass part, and we'll play that with the drums. So you could get kind of a quick backing track without even kind of playing a single note. And then if you wanted to, again, experiment with different flex phrasers, we could say, okay, we're in a piano. So let's say I want to do more of an electric piano sound. So just without even playing a note, you could have a backing track copy different parts to different sounds. So start off with Groove Agent as your inspirational click track, and then lay in some chords. Have different sounds play those chords. In Howie and Sonic, use the flex phraser, and you could just kind of have like wonderful patterns that are just kind of created. And lots of different patterns that you could use for each of the different instruments. So if you wanted to have a bass line, we could come over here and just edit the flex phraser for the bass, or if you wanted to just come over here and just do the piano part. But you could see in just a couple of minutes, you know, say, okay, I don't want this to interfere with the bass, so we'll have this as C1 as the lowest note. So all sorts of great stuff you could do kind of with built-in tools of Groove Agent and Howie and Sonic. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Sable. And we see also Jazz Dude has templates available. All right, so we see from Flyvy just says, I keep getting error messages in Download Assistant. How can I make one be able to download Xstream? So, you know, you should be able, you know, check to make sure if you have any, like, you know, antivirus software that isn't, you know, affecting it. Let's see if it's usually they're also available online to download for if you run into like certain IT departments. But let's see if we go to support and then go to the download section. Let's see if it's maybe. Doesn't look like it's available in there, but check just to make sure that you have, let's maybe under sound content. Doesn't look like it's in there. Sometimes there's a separate. I don't see it listed in there, but you know, check to make sure, like, again, if you have any antivirus software on your computer, because that could be preventing. You might have to let the Steinberg Download Assistant be able to access. Okay, so we see from Jazz Dude says, please, Greg, show the people import tracks from projects. I understand how easy it is once you have like 3 or 4 templates with all tracks prepared and good naming schemes. I don't call it track 1 or so. So let's say I wanted to import the Amos Moses song. So I'll come over here. We will again, so if you have everything kind of configured in one particular project, and what's great about this also is when you say import tracks from project, if we come over and if we want the content or not, sometimes you may just want all of the settings for a particular project. But now we come over, let me just, so at this point we could select all. If I don't want the events, we could put them onto particular tracks. If we wanted to, we could have it create new track versions. But now as soon as we do this, we'll hit OK. And now all the tracks from that project have just been imported. So again, you could choose to exclude automation, to exclude include automation, exclude include actual events. So very easy, very flexible. So, instead of creating, if you don't want to create a lot of multi-track presets, if you're looking for a way of saving folders, here we could also just import an entire folder. So instead of having to create a separate device, we could just come over here. We could select the folder and just choose to import a folder as well. So if you're looking to export a folder with all the settings, all you have to do is just import the track where that folder came from. So makes it even a little easier. All right, so we see from Zohar Kiav. Hi, Greg. My metronome stopped working on Cubase 12 Pro, so my vocalists are having an issue with keeping time. How do I set it up in the control room? So often when I hear this, if you have the control room set up, so make sure that there's in the control room that you have the microphone set up in the control room. Now, if you're doing Q mixes, each of the Q mixes can have the metronome enabled or disabled. So let's say if you were doing bass, drums, guitar, and vocals, and the vocalist didn't want to hear the click track, or you're kind of worried that the click track might bleed through headphones into the very sensitive condenser microphone. So each Q mix, you can have individual, so if you're working with your vocalist, it could be turned on there and set the level, and also it could be active in a control room that you're listening to as the engineer. So each Q mix, the click can be enabled or disabled, or globally within a control room for the monitoring source. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. Tim Weinerhammer says, look at Greg go, masterclass. See, Miller Brown says, nice backing track. So, all right, so we see from George, is it likely that Steinberg will have special offers on Groove Agent extensions, or can I try extensions? Marco Miniman and Simon Phillips drums sound exciting to me. So generally, I don't know of any of that have trial versions, but they do go on sale throughout the year. So, the Simon Phillips were on sale just a couple months ago. So, but but there are also kind of extensive demos to listen to. And I think that they're all really wonderful. Just all the Simon Phillips ones are great because not only do you have Simon's kit, but you have Simon playing it. So that's always a good thing. And super nice guy. Okay, so we see George says, were there ever special offers on Groove Agent extensions in the past? Yeah, definitely. All right. See, Jazz Dude's offering up his templates and realizing that he should just charge $49 and it'll have a lot more value to people. So wonderful to see Gerald Ely on the live stream. We hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us. I guess it's just afternoon now for you. 12:01 p.m. in Martinez, California. All right, Tim K says, my first Cubase song is taking form, thanks largely to these sessions. I have a question about IC Pro. Can the command buttons be customized from within Cubase 13 Pro or just the IC Pro app? So I believe it's just going to be within the IC Pro app because, it's kind of software-based and you would do it there so you could change it. But let's see if we come over, I think... So it'd be just kind of like when we do this is just going to be for the communications, but not configuring the settings. So often you would do that like if you don't have a software interface to make selections. If you had a Mackie control, you can set it up because you don't have like a screen to scroll through all the different parameters, and that's often why you see it set up within the host application to custom configure, but within the IC Pro app, since it's so tightly integrated and all the functions are accessible, that's why it's often going to be done within the controller as opposed to inside of the software application, inside the host of Cubase. See, Jazz D says there are a lot of rubbish disco and EDM presets sold on the internet. Yeah. But it's going to guarantee you a hit song in just a matter of minutes. Yeah. I always find the marketing a bit humorous. Let's see, Jazz Dude set up templates so he could audition every sound in Groove Agent and Halion Sonic 7, and he found great presets. Yeah. See Ziggy Edison saying they call it reassuringly expensive. All right, so we see from Tim K, just says, great explanation, Greg. Thanks, makes sense. All right, so we had a number of questions that were sent in advance. So I think I'm caught up on the chat for now. Let me get to some of the questions. Thanks for all the questions. And you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So let's come over. Let me just open up my Word document here. Okay, we'll activate the project. All right, so the first question that was mailed in says, I am using Cubase Pro 12 and I'm trying to use the MIDI Remote control. I have a MIDI controller that can generate note events per usual, etc. I've set up a surface in the MIDI Remote control and mapped controller buttons to select next track, one to select previous track, and finally one to record enable selected track. When the appropriate MIDI note numbers are received from the controller. Select previous/next track buttons work perfectly. I see the tracks change state in Cubase as expected. However, the record enable selected track controller button arms a track for record, but never the selected one. It's always one particular track in the project, and it cannot be changed. This, of course, works fine when using the mouse/PC keyboard, but not with the MIDI remote control. It says this seems like a bug. All right, so let's say we have a number of tracks. So I programmed my MIDI remote here. So when we look at this, I just have for this button to navigate up, and the next button is going to be navigate down. So this is navigate up, navigate down when I hit it on my particular controller. So if I have this button selected, you can see that as I hit this button, it'll light up, and we're going to select the next track, or we could go up or down, just like that. And the function, and you had that working as expected, but the function that wasn't working for you was the enable record on selected track. So when I pressed this button, I just went to selected track, and then I just chose record enable. So I did it from the selected track category. So as I do this, I'm going to go down a couple tracks and then record enable, and that is all seeming to work as expected here. Now, what sometimes people do is I'll reconfigure this particular button, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say pick up for MIDI remote mapping, record enable. So if I do that, and I have a different track selected, only this particular track is going to be record enabled, because we right clicked and we specifically said on this track pick up for the MIDI record enable. So whatever track is selected at this point, that audio O2 track will always be record enabled. So, but if we choose from the functions selected track record enable, which is what this button is doing, whatever track is selected will automatically be record enabled, disabled by toggling that button. So it seems to work for me as expected, but just make sure that you're doing the record enable from the selected track category, and that it wasn't just one time. And because if you right click and pick up the record enable, that's going to be specifically for that one object, not for all selected channels, but just for that one particular channel. So maybe something like that, that's how it was accidentally configured. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, I'm on Ryzen system, 64 gigs of RAM, UR816C, Cubase Pro 13, Absolute 6. And second, old setup is on Windows 10, same software, VSTs, but a UR Mark II audio interface. The initial sound volumes on Hallian 7 FM Lab, for example, the Grand, are very minimum. The volume master in Hallian is full open, but yet there is very little volume and low expression. I know the FM Lab patches double times was way more expressive before the upgrade to Absolute 6, and specifically Hallian 7. Is there a preference I'm missing or changed accidentally? Both systems are the same. All right, so the FM Lab didn't appear inside, wasn't available until Hallian 7. So if you updated Hallian's, if you're talking about updating that sounded differently in 6 than 7, it wasn't available in 6, but maybe from an earlier version. So let's say if I want to come over and like I have the tines piano, the double tines, that seems kind of like, and I'm not sure when you say the Grand if we're in those all seem to kind of be functioning as I would expect volume wise. So I'm not sure. So let's say if we are on our Hallian 7 here, so I'm not sure if you had inadvertently sent like a MIDI CC volume message that could be causing the volume change, or if you're working in a template And, you know, if we have, let's say, if we have an event here on this particular track, and if we have main volume set very low, no matter what I do in the particular instrument, I could, you know, have the volume totally cranked here. But if there is a MIDI CC message that is low here, that's in an event, that, you know, no matter how hard we would play that volume would be attenuated down. So, and one way to check for this, you know, is always when you need, you know, if you think that there's perhaps a, you know, an errant MIDI CC message, is, you know, one thing that I always like to do, and this could be more of like a microscopic view, is to select the event, go to the MIDI editor, to the list editor, and here we could see, okay, we have, you know, just a couple, let's say, I'll just paint in a couple of notes here as well. So now when we look at this in our MIDI list editor, we can see, okay, there's a lot of CC7, there's a lot of CC11, there's a CC7, it's a very low value. So make sure that you don't have a MIDI continuous controller that is kind of perhaps affecting the volume and kind of attenuating the gain on the MIDI instrument. But I don't think that there's anything different in any of the Halion versions. So I'm running 7.1, which just released this week, and it seems, you know, no volume changes that I've run into. All right, I'm going to jump back to some live questions. See if we have some more. Looks like we do. All right, so we see Roland Stuff checking in from the UK, from Sussex. Glad you could join us. Okay, so we see Fly V says he's getting closer to fixing his download error message. Thanks for your help. All right, so Peter is wishing everyone a safe and enjoyable weekend. All right, Ronnie Martinson Bond says, I have to go. Thanks for all your tips, Greg. So you're welcome. Thanks for joining us, being a part of the community today. All right, so Gerald Ely just asked, hey Greg, let's say I find a loop in MediaBay that I like. How can I add it to the favorites folder? So again, we can think of, you know, some of the loops may be kind of tied in just for, you know, like, so that you have like one file that contains multiple files. If you want to quickly kind of navigate to find a particular loop that you do like, so let's say if we're here, one of the things that you could do is, we'll just kind of come over here. Let's go to, I'll extend this over just a little bit so we could see. All right, so when we do this, you could actually have kind of like a rating system. Okay, so let's say I'm looking for, and I like this, I could, you see this column here that says rating. I could just say, oh, I want to give that 1 star. That's cool. I'll give it 4 stars. So if you have a loop that you like, just kind of come over here. So that's a 2-star sound for me. 3-star. That's a 2-star. That's a 5-star. So now what we could do is just kind of come over, and we could actually search by the rating. So let me just, all right, so let me just reactivate that. Sorry about that. Oh, not real, but rating, sorry. Okay. All right, so I know if we're in like the big media bay window, we can now come over. Let's give it a second here, sorry about that. And we could say, okay, on our ratings, we could say find sorry, my Mac just kind of zoomed out for me. All right. So I could say, okay, we want to go to our VST sound. And I could say, you know, I just want to find 5 rating sounds. So at this point, we could just say, okay, now I want to come over to factory content. Here's all my 5-star sounds. Here's my 4-star sounds, my 3-star sounds. These are my 4-star sounds. So we can actually come over and do the ratings. And let me see if I can remember how to do it on the side. So because each of those files may be kind of tied into a library, all right, so I think, I'm sorry, okay, so I'm just going to come over here, let's say to the character. Instead, I'm going to go to media, and then we could choose rating. So here I can say, let's just find a 5-star. Let's find a 4-star, 3-star. So this way you could find your particular, and so if you like the particular sound, just, you know, come over here, make sure that you have the ratings checked, and you'll see it under media. And then you could just adjust the particular ratings. And then if you have the ratings set here, you can pick and choose and say you're only looking for your 5-star sound. So again, as you kind of come over here, you could just kind of scroll over, and you like that sound. That way, any sound you like, just quickly rate it. You like this particular preset, then you could have your go-to, your favorite ones, because you just rated them accordingly. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Gerald. All right, so we see from HSP Products, who asks, hi, Mr. Undo. You can just call me Greg. Please, I want to know if Beat Designer custom quantize, or we just have the swing and kit delay options to create our personal grooves. So with Beat Designer, and I'll just open up. So, you know, once we have kind of, you know, Beat Designer here, so we can put in, there's 2 different swing feels. So I'll just come and we'll just put on some hi-hat so we could hear it. So add an instrument track. Let's do a quick groove agent. Okay, so I'll just okay, so now I'm just going to take this and just, so if we have kind of two different swings. So if we wanted to put, so you could kind of navigate between two different swing feels and have variation there. But there's not necessarily a custom quantize setting for that, but you can always just simply insert into the pattern at the cursor position, and then do additional quantization within the drum editor if you needed to. So once you have that in, so we can see just that little quantize pattern here. If we just drop it to the beat, and I'll just, so just kind of taking that particular pattern there, that was one of the grooves that was put in from Beat Designer. So you could have two different independent swing fields or swing feels, and then you could have varying amounts of that swing. So you could kind of create tension within that. So that's kind of a unique thing to Beat Designer. And if you wanted to do more traditional quantization on particular notes, then you could take that pattern out of Beat Designer and process it within Cubase. All right, so we see from Roland's stuff. Hi, Greg. I'm thinking of getting the Nano Control 2. I see Nano Control maybe 2.1. Can it or other remotes be set up to permanently control all transport bar functions for all projects? So what you could do, like with the MIDI Remote here, like, so this is my Nano Control 2, so I have the transport, so we can play. And what you could do is create what's called a mapping page. So if we go to our, if I wanted to come directly here, we could do a new mapping page. So we could click on plus, we could do that, or you could just choose to duplicate a mapping page as well. So if you want to come here, I think we can just duplicate it. So, but once you have it set up for your transport, like mine, I think every one of the mapping pages, the transport is going to be identical, and kind of, it's not, you can change it, but unless you physically, intentionally change it, then those settings will stick. So mine is always going to be doing transport regardless, and I will change these parameters, but not the transport. I'll leave alone, so it's going to be consistent, and you could just kind of have muscle memory to hit the button for transport as needed. All right, so a question from Daniel. Stupid question. Why would I ever want record enable off? I mean, if I click the track and press record, I obviously want to record it. Because sometimes you may click a track to do editing, and you may not want to record something that's already existing on the track. So if I come over here and I just happen to select this track and I'm recording, and I'm saying, okay, I'm recording on something else, because you could have it to the point where there are preferences where when you, let's say we go to editing of event selection, does track selection. So let's come over here. Track selection follows event selection. So you may inadvertently select an event. Let's say I'm recording here, and you select this event. Now that this event can be record enabled accidentally when you want it maybe just to move it. So that's why you have those levels of control, because different scenarios, you may accidentally erase something or record over the most amazing part you've ever created. That was the hook of your next huge song, and we don't want you to accidentally record over that. All right, we see that Gerald Ely is happy to get Uno Momento's beer because it's hot where he's at. So, all right, so we have Da Vinci Girl saying hello from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, Development of a Void asks, is there a way to highlight part of a track with the range tool, delete it, and then have the two sections automatically connect together? Thank you, Greg. So yeah, and we'll call that like a crop, or we'll show you here quickly. All right, so okay, so let's say I want to take part of the range, so I'm going to select with the range tool. So this range, I want to delete this range and have what was after that range immediately kind of jump over there. So I think it's just Command or Control plus Shift plus X. And that's all you have to do. So Command or Control, Shift, X. So if we just hit Control X, we delete that and we still leave the space. So Control, Command plus Shift plus X, and then we could just delete that time. So, and I think we could also access it from range, and we would choose delete time. So again, edit to range, delete time, or Command, Control plus Shift plus the letter X. And then if you wanted to kind of do the opposite, where you wanted to delete what was before or after the range, that would be called a crop. So we go to range and choose crop, and then that's kind of the exact opposite. But try Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter X. See Jazz Dude just pointing out about the OMF Stay Home Free patch shop presets. Yes, there's wonderful presets. It was kind of a project organized by Gary Gibbons, who's like the patch shop expert in the world, and just a wonderful sound designer. So during COVID, he was kind enough to create a free sound set, so a free collection of pad shop sounds. So definitely worth getting, and the price is right. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me, so I think I'm back. All right, so we see from Da Vinci Girl says, I do not see a sense in Hallion. I use Contact, and for $124 cross-grade Hallion 7 is too much expensive. I think to do a library, why should I do this? Well, I think, they're different tools, because Hallion is not only a sampler, it is different synthesizer. It's a whole synthesis engine, and it allows you to actually create VST instruments. So if, I'm not sure, I think Contact, and I'm not a Contact expert, but I think it's primarily just a sample playback engine. I don't think it includes FM synthesis, wavetable synthesis, granular synthesis. spectral synthesis, virtual analog synthesis, an organ oscillator, and all those different elements combined. So it's a bit of a misnomer just to consider it like a contact equivalent, because it is a lot more than that. See, Tim Weinheimer says, thanks, Greg. I forgot about the list editor. A great tool to see what's going on. So yeah, it's whenever you have a weird MIDI thing, look in the list editor and you'll probably find your answer as to what's causing it. See, Best Green Jesus says, Xstream is a fun plugin. Took me back to learning pad shop days. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl says, when to use MIDI channels. For me, it's much more comfortable to use a VST instrument direct, because a lot of VST instruments, so when we come over here to Hallian Sonic, we could have 16 different sounds loaded into one instrument. So if I wanted to have, you know, a Xstream synth loaded here, and then I wanted my amped Electra on channel 2, and I wanted my FM synth, my FM lab on MIDI channel 3. So instead of having to switch between 16 different instruments, you could actually just have one instrument with 16, or if you have Hallian, 64 different sounds loaded up. So, you know, it makes sense to just, you know, often do this, and some instruments don't, and because especially since Hallian has support for multi-core processors as well. So this way, instead of constantly opening up 16 different instruments, you could have one instrument open. So let's say I have my Hallian Sonic here, and I'll add 2 MIDI tracks. And what's cool about this, and I'll just add okay, so now when I select different channels here, they're automatically just will switch the instrument that's loaded up. So let's say, okay, now I want to go to, you know, Iconica Sketch, and I needed a harp sound. So if I selected the wrong patch, we have unlimited undos as well. So now I go to MIDI channel 4, we could load up a harp. So, and again, when I come here, I can say, okay, let's select this. When I select a track, the instrument is automatically updated. So I have one instrument open, and now you could switch back and forth without having to open up multiple instruments, taking a lot of space. So that's why people use MIDI channels, because MIDI devices will often play back multi-timbrally and support multiple MIDI channels, especially for layers. All right, we see from Gerald Ely, just says, thanks, Greg. I thought it might be a bad idea to move them. I'll stick to the star rating system. Yeah, I think the star rating system works very well. So. Okay, so we see FlyV says, I'm within Download Manager. When I'm not able to install it, it says failed. How do I stop this again? Sorry. So also make sure that you're logged in with your, with your My Steinberg credentials. I've seen this happen as well. So when you go to your My Account here, make sure that you're actually logged in as well there. Okay, so we see Zohar says, metronome working now. Please go through using the arranger in a project that's halfway through. Okay, so let's say I have a project that's kind of done, and I want to do a quick arranger track, and we'll kind of start from scratch on it. Let me just see where we have one that would work for this. Yeah, we'll try this. All right, so let's say we want to kind of start off our project. I'm going to add an arranger track. Okay, so let's say we're going to do our introduction. Okay, so just make sure where it's. So we're going to start here. All right, so now we'll call this our intro. So Alt Option, double click. And now I want to do. What did you say? And all right, so we'll go to verse 1. All away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day. All right, so let's say we'll call this verse 1. And let's say I just maybe want to do that as another hook. So say, what did you say? So I'll come here. Let's create a new part. All right, I'll just hit enter here. All right, and we'll call this vocal intro hook. And let's just take a listen to the next part here. You were the party, the big event. I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited. So we can say, okay, this will be our pre-chorus. All right, so say we want to quickly build an arrangement here. So let's do intro, let's do vocal intro back to intro to verse 1. So now when we listen to this, I'm going to activate the arranger track. So now when we play, we have our intro. What did you say? What did you So now it's going to play through the whole verse. You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000. Then it'll go to the pre-chorus here. So this will go on kind of linearly. Then I wanted to jump back to. Right after this, it's going to jump back to verse 1 again. So this way you could try out different arrangement ideas very easily. All right, so we see from Flyvies and download managers, and it's not able to install it. It says failed. How do I stop this again? Sorry. So, and we see, yeah, let us know what it says in your activation manager, which is what Tim K asked. All right, reading through comments. All right, so Zohar just says, does the Cork Nano Control work with folders? I haven't used mine in a while because it doesn't seem to work once I add folders to the project. All right, so I have a folder in the rock project here. So yeah, mine seems to work fine with folders, without folders. So like, let's take a look where we had the MIDI remote here set up for Untitled, where we could navigate to our different tracks. All kind of works. I wanted to record enable that track. I wanted to hit play, stop. I want to fast forward, rewind. So mine, whether it has folder or not, doesn't seem to have an impact on it. All right, wonderful to see David M. checking in from Liverpool. Hope you're well. Hope you had, I think you were saying that on the last Zoom meetup that you might have, I think you're doing Thursday night gigs. If you had a gig last night that went well. See, Graham Witcher says the extreme free synth from Steinberg looks fab, as demonstrated by Dom Segalis. No reason why Cubase is just the best DAW by a million miles. We like our customers. David M says, just had to grab the 50% off Halion 7, probably bye-bye hardware sampler now. We'll see. So which hardware sampler do you still have? Seems like it's a whole product category that's just died. As someone who would do vocal corrections, and we would treat our Akai samplers with floppy disks like DAWs when I worked in studios years and years ago. So prevalent. Now it's just so irrelevant. All right, my Chatfield jumped. All right, let me just found my spot. See, Roland Stuff says, thanks for the Nano Control 2 explanation, Greg. All right, you see that Graham Witcher saying his move to Oxford has gone well, so it's good to hear. It's always fun. I don't want to move for a long time. All right, Gerald Ely just says, where do we get those free pad shop sounds? Let's see if we could find it quickly. I think it's the online music foundry, I think. So I'm just doing OMF Stay Home Pad Shop sounds. Stay Home Free Edition. So go to Online Music Foundry, which is Gary Gibbons' page, and check out his other sounds as well. So Doomstrophic. So he's done just amazing presets. He's incredibly talented. So go to Online Music Foundry. If you just look for the Stay Home Edition, you should be able to get that. right, so we see Mike's Party 828 says that's nice. All right, Daniel asks, please allow me an ethereal question. You do great troubleshooting, but could you do like a best practice tutorial or best preference and setups, or like a full song making in like 2 to 3 hours, etc.? I mean, I think it could be. I think everyone could have a completely different approach to that. So what I would do versus what Teddy Riley would do versus what a Michael Wagner or Chuck Ainlay would do, and kind of coming up with a song and making a song work could be completely different processes. But I think it's important to, figure out what works for you. And I think, Cubase is incredibly powerful at allowing people to have their own kind of dedicated and unique workflows and still kind of be working at a very high level of functionality and efficiency. So I think Cubase is great at that. So I think sometimes, just doing, like a best practice for me may not be applicable to what you're doing. But so I'm not sure if I could do that well. I see kind of a follow-up point from Daniel. Says, I want to learn not only how to do something, but why something is better for you personally. So I like, as I approach something, I try to keep it fairly simple. I think people sometimes get bogged down in like granular details that are unnecessary, like, like layering, so many different things, like spending hours layering background vocals. But if the hook is bad, it, spending a lot of time on stuff. I think one thing I would try to avoid is, just because you have the ability to do some, particular types of edits doesn't mean that you should. So, there's lots of people that are just kind of, and, maybe that I'm older now, I'm just thinking, that we could use technology smarter, and people will say, oh, you can't work like you did with analog tape with a DAW, it's just a completely different workflow. And it's not true. Just people choose not to. You can treat it like you're not doing any or very limited overdubs or very limited punch-ins. You're not going to do editing, and you're going to concentrate on a performance. So I think, that you can impose discipline without necessarily, that you could create discipline within your workflow, so that you're not relying on technology as kind of a like a crutch, so that you can make a decision and get the best performance. And I like I remember spending time with my friend Frank Philpetty, who's like just an amazing audio engineer, and he's just like we're just talking about, because he did a lot of work with James Taylor, and he's just like, what, with James Taylor you could put an SM57 up and it's going to sound just like James Taylor. And he won a Grammy, like the very first Yamaha O2R console. He went to James's house, I think in where not Nantucket, but Martha's Vineyard, and just took the same console that was everyone was just coming out with, and he won Best Engineering Album. He won Best Engineering Non-Classical for the recording for that album, and he did it with like the original Yamaha O2R 96, which you can get for like $100. But just making your tools work for you, I think, is a really good thing, and coming up with your own workflows, I think, is a very powerful thing to developing your own personal production style. So Gerald Ely says that multi-instrument Halligan tip with MIDI tracks is a great tip. So yeah. All right, so Mike's Party 828 asks, can you go over the basic grid/snap for project versus edit areas to match? I screwed up my settings. All right, so let me just switch projects here. Okay, so let's say we have our grid settings here. So we could set our grid to different elements. So now, so we can now have our grid. So first thing we want to do is make sure that you have snap turned on. If snap isn't turned on, that as we move events, they could be freely moved anywhere and they won't snap to our grid. So we could do that by hitting the letter J. So now that we hit the letter J, we can see that this light turns on just to the left of grid, and I have it set to, let's say, bar. We have different choices, and now as I can only place the beginning of the events on the measure. If we set this to beat, now we can, as we adjust it, we can say, okay, we're at measure 8, beat 1, beat 2, 3, 4, measure 9, beat 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to snap to the beat. Or we could say use quantize. So now we could have this snap based on the quantized value, which we have currently set to 8th notes. Now there's also an adapt to zoom, which is quite interesting because if we're zoomed in like this, it's going to snap to the measure. And as we say we're zoom out, and if we're zoomed in to a high degree, now it can snap to, we're doing, I think, 16th notes or 32nd notes as we zoom in. So the zoom will scale depending upon your resolution. So now we do this, it's on a beat. If we zoom in further, we can see now we're doing 16th notes or 32nd notes. So this way, as depending on your level of zoom, and we could do this also for, and if we wanted to, and there is a function where, like, if I'm dealing with bars and beats, and let's say I have a vocal file and I want my audio to not, I just wanted to nudge it ever so slightly, that we could, if we have our nudge palette, so make sure right click and make sure that you have nudge turned on, and then we could actually choose to, it used to be that the nudge was always kind of tied intrinsically, so that if we have this and I hold down my controller command and move left and right, that this nudge would be linked to the grid. But sometimes we may want to nudge while our master grid format is in bars and beats. We may want this to be in seconds. And I can say, I want this to be 10 milliseconds. So I want this later or earlier. And at this point, we could just, as we nudge, even though my primary timeline is in bars and beats, I could have the nudge be independent. And if we're in the editor, we could kind of do the same type of function. So let's say, I wanted to now, come here, we could nudge. So let's enlarge the particular part. Let me just actually get that more on the grid since I moved it. All right. Now within the editor, we have kind of this very similar functionality. So if we wanted to do nudging here, we could nudge based upon the quantized value. We could have, so our bars and beats, if I wanted to nudge again in seconds, and then we could choose, I want to nudge these MIDI notes by 10 seconds. So just holding down Control or Command plus the right arrow, left arrow, then we could just simply nudge in the same way. So, but you might, where you see this, you may want to just say link to grid. And if you feel like the nudge is not making any sense, that way it's going to be tied directly to the grid that you're working with. So let me know if that's helpful, makes sense, or more confusing. All right, so we see a comment from Daniel. It says, I understand people are different, but for starters, I'd like to have someone to copy first. If I'm doing stuff like Greg, I'm not doing anything wrong, and that's a great start. All right. All right, HSP Products asks, can you give us a personal opinion about this Battery 4 versus Groove Agent 5? So my personal opinion is I haven't opened up Battery 4 in like a decade. So I haven't felt the need to use Battery 4. I used to use it a lot way back in the day, like when it was first released. But I haven't really used it since like Groove Agent SE came out. So maybe that's, well, that I guess that represents my opinion in a way. So I haven't felt the need to do anything in Battery 4. All right, I'm going to jump over. We had some more questions that were sent in. We see Best Green Jesus waiting on an absolute sale. So we just had one just a couple months ago. Sorry if you missed it. All right, so we have a question. How to set the play position by clicking anywhere in the project window or editor? All right, so this question you see a lot online where if we were playing back a project, that when we click, often we could, as we mentioned earlier, like if we click, we could select notes or events, but it doesn't affect the playhead position. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to switch my playhead position to here, and I click, the playhead doesn't move because often this is going to be using for selecting events. But what we can do is while it's playing, if you hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, I can now click anywhere, and that takes it out of selection mode and will allow us to kind of play. And this will work on the main project window as well. So let's say if I'm here and we're playing, Alt or Option plus Shift, and then I can just move the playhead anywhere freely in the editor or within, just so you can see it moving as we do this without interruption. So to get the playhead position to jump anywhere, just again Alt or Option plus Shift and click, and then that will override the selection mode and allow the playhead to just be freely placed while it's playing. All right, so we had a question. When rendering audio tracks, does it include all automation and panning? So it depends upon what settings that you actually have selected. So let's come over here. Let's say let me just jump to a different project quickly. I have this kind of set up. Let's activate it. Okay, so let's say I have an audio track here and it has automation. Okay, so we see my volume automation goes down and then goes up. So if I select the event and we go to Edit to Render in Place, we'll go to my render settings. So if I have this set to dry, what this will do, and we see transfer channel settings. So I have my track here, and let's say I just had it, well, I'll just, so let's say we had our track here, and let's say I had like a number of edits that I had done in this particular event here. So I'll just make a quick edit just to kind of show. Okay. So I'm going to select these events, and let's go to render in place. So when it's set to dry and I hit render, what it's going to do, it's going to render that file over. It's going to consolidate all of those 3 different events with the volume change, and the automation is carried over. Now, if I choose to render, we go to our render settings and I choose channel settings, this would then allow us to actually see the automation be applied into the rendered file. So now when I hit render, we'll see that this particular file, the volume automation here, I'll just make this, that the volume automation is now embedded in the particular file. So again, if I select this, go to render in place, and I choose channel settings, that as we do this, we'll see that the automation isn't carryover, that the automation and our settings, and if we wanted to include, is now embedded into the file. So that when we do our channel settings, that's going to include our channel strip, automation, as well as the EQs. So now when we go, and if I wanted to include the send effects, if I wanted to include the send effects and the master effects, we could just render with all those different choices. And this will be very similar if we did a render using the export audio mixdown. So if we choose multiple and we have some files selected, if we choose our disabled dry, that wouldn't include automation. The inserts and strip would, as well as adding groups and sends, and the master effects would include. All right, next question. If you have frozen and unfrozen tracks in your project and you want to do edit range, cut time, or edit range, delete time, does that work on frozen tracks in Cubase 13? So it's not going to work on frozen tracks. So let's say we have this piano part here. So let me just, all right, so now I can edit my MIDI. But now what I'm going to do is just choose to freeze this particular track. So when we come over here, we can go to our track settings. We'll open this up, and we see our little snowflake here. So now when we do this, freezing the track is basically almost doing a render in place in the background. So when we do that, though, we can't necessarily do any editing. So because this MIDI data is almost a picture that's over, that is basically, instead of playing the MIDI to the virtual instrument, is automatically now playing it in the background as an audio file. So I'm going to freeze. So now if we have frozen that track, I can try to move it. I can't. Let's take this event, and I want to do a range selection. So if I want to do a range selection on this and move it over, nothing is done because this track is locked. If I do a range selection with the event above it, the top event will go, but this event won't go. So, when we do freeze, it's going to have less flexibility. It's easy. You don't have to set up different configurations. It will play. But if you wanted to do range editing and other editing, we would have to unfreeze. We could choose to delete the freeze files or keep the freeze files. So in this case, it may make more sense to say, okay, I want to render that in place. So I will come over, let's go to my render settings, and I'm going to render that in place. And now that I've rendered it, I could take my range selection and do that. So render in place, I think it's more flexible, and there's a lot of advantages so that you can do edits on the resulting rendered file, and it's not being hidden in the background. So, for simplicity, the freeze is really great, and it's a concept that's been around for 25 years, and it's a way that a lot of people are very comfortable working, but it's maybe not as flexible as render in place. All right, next question mailed in. Can you show us how to import a video and just make some quick editing of that, just to let everyone know how this process is done and some of the available options? Okay. So I'll just go ahead and I'll remove this track. So Cubase is really intended as a tool where we could compose and edit audio, do post-production, music production, and have that go directly to video. It's not really intended to be a video editor, that we can do some different aspects. So let's say I want to import a video file. We'll just come over, I'll do this. So it will automatically extract the audio file of that video. But now that we have the video file, we can now hit F8, and that would open up our video preview window. So as we look at it here, we could see our video window. Now you may get into different situations where it's like you're doing a concert and it's like, oh, we decided to cut the, this amount of time from the guitar solo because it was a bad guitar solo. So at that point, we could grab like the range tool, and just like we did earlier, I could come right over here and say, let's just do that delete time. And now we could change and do some basic video editing, but it's not going to do transitions. It's not going to do dissolves, color corrections. But if you have to do just, some really basic copy, paste, cut a part out of the video so that you could continue scoring without waiting for the new video to be rendered by the video editor, uploaded, and then downloaded, that you could just do this very quickly and easily, get your in and out points, and then you could do a basic video edit right there. Okay, next question was when you assign different outputs in Groove Agent, you have to select each drum to change its output. I wish there was a way to select an output for one drum and have subsequent drums select increased output numbers. That's what I want every time, and I have to select 10 separate drums to make it happen. Okay, so if we want to kind of maintain the outputs, let's come over here to and this will be slightly different in an acoustic agent kit versus a beat agent kit. So once we have different, so let's say I'm playing and let me just switch this to. Okay, so we go to our mix console, and everything is now, all the sounds are coming out of one particular stereo output. And I think what this question is running into is that we could just say, okay, I want to take this, and I want this to go to output 2, this to go to output 3, this to go to output 4, etc., so that each of these can be routed to separate outputs. All right, and instead of having to do this for every single drum kit, what we could do is we'll just set these all back to our kit mix here. So once I have that set up where, we could, so I'll just quickly set this up. So we'll say 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so in our mixer, we can now save a preset. So we're going to call this, we'll call it July 5th. So if everything is set to kit mix here, instead of having to do this annoyingly all the time, what we're able to do is to come over here and we could just load up different presets. So we can say, okay, let's go to July 5th. And now all of the output rendering, all the outputs will automatically be mapped. Here's one I'd saved from a previous live stream called multi-out. So now all of these, the output routing can be saved as a preset. So basically you could save almost a channel, like the Groove Agent mixer as a preset, and that would include all of the routings. So that's with a acoustic agent kit. Now let's look at a beat agent kit. The beat agent kit doesn't have the similar, like, you know, it's more of an MPC style paradigm. So if we, and as we work with this, what we could say is I want my kicks to go out of output 2. I want snares, let's say, to go out of we can send snares to output 3. You know, we could also, so each of these pads can be set to different outputs. So let me just come over here quickly and just set the outputs. And so when working with a beat agent kit, we just activate the outs quickly in my VST instrument rack. Okay. Just have so if we see this little lock icon here, what we could do now is lock outputs. So as I go to load a different kit, so we can see that these are going to be routed to output 2, output 4, output 3, you know, output 8. We'll have output 7. So I go to load a different kit. All of my outputs are now locked to the same outputs that we had before. So you could lock the colors, but also lock the outputs. So that way you could keep the outputs. If you want it multi-outs, you could lock it in the beat agent kit or save it as a preset within. So we come over again to our acoustic agent kit. Just click right here and save a preset, and all the outputs will be recalled. All right, so I had another question that was mailed in. It says, Dear Greg, is there a solution for this innuendo scenario? I have talent in the studio, and we're recording a lot of takes for a TV commercial. These takes are going to be delivered to my customer. I choose to use the track versions for every take. At the end, I have, for example, 35 versions. I want to export all the versions to files where the name must include track versions, name, and ID. Referring to ID is important because the customer notes his or her favorite takes during the session. ID must follow the process all the way. All right, so let's take a look at Nuendo. So we'll open up Nuendo. Let me have to renew my license here. Bear with me just a second. All right, so we'll create empty. All right, so I'm going to add audio track, and we'll say Club Cubase voiceover. Okay, so I'm going to set up just a short punch in, punch out point. So let's say we're doing our voiceover here. Okay, so we do, let's say, I'll arm it for record. And we will do take one. Let's get punch out. All right, let's do a new version. So we'll just say okay, so Command or Control plus Shift plus N, new version. Okay, so we'll do a number of these. Okay, so now we have a number of track versions here. So these are different takes. And what I want to do is let's go into our pool window. So Control or Command plus the letter P. We're going to go to the audio, and we can see that we have all these different takes, and we want to put an ID. So, and as we've done this, you know, we can see that we have all these ordered sequentially, and these are matching the track version numbers. All right, so I'm going to select these particular ones, and we could go to right click and we'll see rename, advanced rename. So we could say, okay, we want free text. So we'll say, you know, Ford commercial, big celebrity. Okay, so it's going to be like our celebrity's name, the client. We could also put in a number. So we could say, I want to come in. So we could now increment these. And then we could put a prefix with the number. So I'm going to say track version and put a space. And then we could automatically start the counter at number 1. We could also choose to decrement numbers. We could add an appendix to text afterwards. So now at this point, I'm going to hit OK. And all the file names, as we look at them, will say, okay, we're going to do Ford commercial, typo big celebrity, track version 1, track version 2, track version 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, try going into, and this is a Nuendo specific feature, but if we go to rename, advanced rename, that you could have, 8 different fields that you could add, project time, date, file extension, audio bit size, free text, you want it to be empty, original name, etc. So lots of different criteria. And as you work with those particular criteria, you could, remove all numbers. So lots of great stuff you could do there. So I think that would do the trick for you, what you want to do and accomplish. So let me know if that works for you, if you want to send an email. All right. Let's go back to our live questions. And again, you can always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we see Nick has to take off. He's wishing everyone a great weekend. See Sherbek Ganiev just says Logic Pro #1. Like, I guess maybe you don't have the ability to go on the Logic Pro live stream. So, all right. So Sable Winters asks, why would I use Iconica? So we could think of Iconica as an orchestral library. So anytime you'd want to use orchestral samples, and some of the things that makes Iconica unique is that, you know, a lot of people spend hours and hours creating like expression maps for particular, you know, orchestral instruments, so that as we would play, that we have multiple articulations available. So, you know, Iconica will work already within your Hallian Sonic or Hallian. But one of the great things is, like, if I wanted to, you know, when we see a violin sound in an instrument, so we open this up, you know, and we play, I could hit a key and have kind of different presets. So if I come here, we can say, okay, I want this to be pizzicato. So we go to C#1. And we could have spiccato. So, or we want it to be legato. So we could just come over here and, okay, I want it to be sustain. So when we work with this, I want to do like create tension. I want to do like kind of Alfred Hitchcock kind of tension. So, you know, we have all these different samples. These will all do round robins. So it's not like when you're doing notes repeated after each other that it's cycling between different variations. You can bring in the amount of the ambience mics. But one of the great things is, you know, we have this concept of articulations and expression. So a lot of times people will get huge orchestral libraries and use like one sound out of like, let's say 9 sounds that are available for them to use. And it's, you know, the companies have developed all these different sounds so that you could switch between these different sounds efficiently and have kind of the articulations that a real musician would have. So once we have Iconica, we could actually come to the expression maps and just say import key switches automatically. And instead of having to make these key switches manually, which most sample libraries you have to do, it's kind of annoying, time-consuming, uncreative process. But now we could just come over here and have and have all of the expressions automatically created for you. Plus, you know, it just sounds great. So let's say this is even the Iconica sketch. So I'll just revert this since I've completely destroyed it. But just to give you an idea what the free version that comes with Cubase sounds like, instead of having to go out and, you know, this will give you kind of a great idea of so that'll give you kind of an idea of like the flavors of great orchestral samples that you'll get with, and again, wonderful integrations and articulation support that's already kind of built into Cubase. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce has made it. And he's recording Steve Allen and our fellow Club Cubase attendee. He started it today. We hope your dad's doing well, Michael. have fun with your sessions with Steve. It's another great example of people collaborating professionally who met on Club Cubase live streams. So I think that's cool. All right, so Donnie asks, is it possible to set up MIDI note input in the key editor with a controller or iPad to simulate a step sequencer? Have rows of buttons that input notes at specific positions like Roland TR-909, 808. So let me just... so, you know, there's nothing that integrates directly within the key editor. But a lot of times people will utilize, you know, like the MIDI plugins for this. So if you go to like MIDI inserts, you know, there are different, you know, arpeggios. You know, we could also just come over and, you know, like if you want to do like step designer input, you know, we could come over here and have different step designer inputs, but there's nothing that really works directly integrating within the key editor. We could take all the MIDI plugins and have those automatically go into the key editor, but I don't know if a step sequencer that's integrated. I don't think that there's any key like step sequencer that's kind of integrated directly in. I mean, there's step sequencing inside. But you know, but nothing that I know of currently that does that. Okay, so we see Michael Pierce says, "Oh, a quick question. Did you get my question a week or so ago about missing libraries in Cubase 12, which are all there in Cubase 13? I may have missed it." So I think what I would do is make sure, Michael, I've seen similar things, and if you go like look for the media, there's like make sure you have the latest version of the media bay for your Cubase 13. So let's see if we can find it quickly here. No, I don't think that's it. Let's see if that's, but there is like a media bay update. We just look quickly and sometimes you get it if you go to your it will often update as soon as you go to the Steinberg download assistant. Sorry, don't want to go there. Just looking. Yeah, so go here, try going to sound content and accessories under the support downloads, and try just installing the media bay one more time, and I think that would solve your issue, Michael. All right. Sable Winter says she just cleared 103 gigabytes from my PC. I felt pretty, oh so pretty and witty, and I just kind of had to do the same thing earlier in the week on my personal computer. So I understand. All right, glad to see you, Michael Pierce, about your dad being relatively stable. It's good. All right, so Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, here's a strange thing. I think my external keyboard no longer work with Halion Sonic 7 after the upgrade to 7.01. Or could it be something I've done? Puzzling. So I don't know what if... Yeah, so I don't know anything that would cause that. You know, when in doubt, so let's say if you go to, you open up your Halion Sonic 7 here. All right, so say, we're here. It's a cool patch. All right, so make sure, like, when we go to the routing, that, that it's not set to all not connected, all MIDI inputs. If you have two controllers, see if it works with one controller and not the other. Another thing to do as a software control test is if we go to hit Alt or Option plus the letter K, and you get the on-screen keyboard, and see if that is transmitting to Halion Sonic 7 and not your controller. You could always, if you're having MIDI communication problems, one of the things you could do is just come over to the MIDI inserts. And once we go to the MIDI inserts, at this point, you could go to MIDI monitor and see that once you play from your MIDI input port, that it is communicating. Also make sure that, like, when you add the instrument, that it's not, because now we could have our input channels in the routing area here. Make sure that this isn't set to like a channel that's not loaded in Halion Sonic. So a lot of times this would be any. I have a sound on MIDI channel 1. If this is set to a different number, now it's going to only transmit to MIDI channel 2 from the controller input and not any. So you could check that as well. So there's a couple things to check. But it's, if it's working with other devices or other instruments, then it's going to be something kind of along these lines where it's being set to a MIDI input channel that's not being used in the instrument or something. All right, so we see Sable Winter says, thanks, Greg. How does this compare to Vienna Orchestra, or does it? So I think I haven't critically listened to the Vienna Orchestra, so I think some of it might be, this, I'm not sure how they've updated their libraries over the years. But I think you could listen to like some wonderful examples. But if you have 13, you already have Iconica Sketch. That will give you an idea. And you see Jazz Dude, I think, who has both. Says VSL is much more expensive and kind of start at $500. See Tim Weinheimer is saying, I think if you buy the wrong cloud, the 808, 908, 707 have built-in step sequencer like the original drum machines. So yeah, I still don't think that would integrate into the key editor like what Donnie was looking for. All right, so we have from MZ Lachine, is there a way to double the tempo without affecting the tracks which are in musical mode? Because usually tracks that are in musical mode would automatically, when we double tempo, if we wanted the tracks to actually follow the tempo changes, so if we have a track and we double the tempo, if it's in musical mode by default, so they will, once a track is or an event is in musical mode, then it will follow the tempo changes. It's kind of bound to whatever the tempo is. But if you have, but if they're not in musical mode, they won't necessarily, if they're not in musical mode, then they're kind of independent of the track tempo. So let me know if there's from MZ Lachine, if there's a particular reason you don't need the tracks which are in musical mode to double tempo. See, from Best Green Jesus says, going to get myself absolute this year. Hope this summer fall sales cover that. Okay, we'll see if there's any more questions that come in. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. And once again, for next week, we'll be doing Tuesday. I have to do something on Friday. And then I will be, the week after that, we'll have 2 live streams. And then after that, the week of the 22nd, I will be on vacation. So there won't be live streams that week, but we'll pick up. I'm not sure if I guess it would be 29th. We will pick up, and that might be our Zoom social meetup. So, but we'll see if there's any more questions. All right, so we see from Daniel, says, thank you for another great stream. You're welcome. See if there's more questions. Great to have so many people show up on a U.S. holiday, so I didn't feel like I was working unnecessarily in the United States. All right, we'll give it our minute or two. See if there's... Okay, so Sable wants me to repeat the schedule again. So we'll have next Friday, there won't be a live stream. I have something to do. The week after that, there will be live streams. So there's going to be a stream next Tuesday. Next Friday, no stream. The week after that, which would be the 15th of July, we'll have our 2 normal streams. The week of the 22nd of July, I will be on vacation that time. All right, let's see. I'll give it another minute and see if there's any other questions. If not, we'll wrap up a little bit early. Feel like I didn't miss out on my holiday weekend, which feels like now I have 2 Fridays in 1 week. Thank you for the kind words, Gerald. All right, so with that, I think we are out of questions. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. We want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back on Tuesday for another live stream, and hope that everyone is enjoying some time off with their family over the holiday season, as a lot of people are taking vacations. But everyone, thanks for joining us today to make such a wonderful community. And we'll be back on Tuesday for the next live stream. Looking forward to seeing everyone. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you Tuesday. Thank you. Goodbye.